For those who have witnessed a wedding objection during the speak now or forever hold your peace portion, what happened? No objections were made, unfortunately, but back when I worked in a hotel a few years ago, I got to witness a very interesting wedding. In preparation, we had to ensure we'd ordered enough blue WKD in as this was the groom's drink of choice, first red flag. The whole wedding took place in the hotel. The function room also hosted the ceremony, so we started pretty early that day. Before the ceremony, the bride had taken 3 bottles of Prosecco up to her room while she was getting ready, and was clearly tipsy before the wedding started, but seemed to act sober enough that whoever was conducting the ceremony was none the wiser. Ceremony seemed normal, but I was prepping the bar, so I wouldn't have known either way. As it ends, all the guests flood out for drinks whilst we changed the function room and set out the tables for the sit-down meal. The guests were rough as a badger's to put it politely. I already knew one of them as he'd been to the hotel before, acting like a total when I told him the bar was closed and I wouldn't be serving him. However, he was being especially polite to me this time as it was clear his day for the wedding was definitely not the same girl he was in with just a few weeks ago, who I suspect was a paid acquaintance. Before the meal even began, we were starting to worry if we'd had enough alcohol. These people drank like fish, but we managed to get them all seated and fed, and everyone is being friendly and well behaved. As the night goes on, the bride is slowly becoming so buzzed she can barely stand and has changed from her wedding dress into a very scant pink negligee with a tutu skirt. She's also given up on using the bathroom, so she loudly announces she will be relying solely upon nature wheeze from this point onwards. Before midnight, we are nearly totally out of spirits. The guests are ordering shots every round. I tried to deny service, but my manager was having none of it, and as the hotel was struggling, they wanted to make as much money as possible and have shotted us out of almost everything. Blue WKDs are long gone, but the groom has a lovely blue smile at this point. After the bride finally gives up trying to shoot disgusting liquors that have likely been there since the hotel was built, they head over to the dance floor. The party starts winding down and it's time for the last dance, but the bride decides she'd prefer to have this with a male wedding guest, which really sets off the groom. She then loudly announces she'll be throwing an after party in their suite and everyone is invited in the hot tub. Funnily enough, the groom isn't thrilled and kicks off. Another member of staff manages to calm everyone down and convinces the DJ to play the last dance song once more before he leaves and the groom agrees. Everyone starts packing up and the bride comes back from her room in her third outfit of the night, a nice gray stained tracksuit. She's adamant she wants another cigarette before bed. God knows how many packs she went through that day, especially sad considering the money in for the wedding came from her parents' inheritance who both passed away from cancer. She can't find a lighter and becomes irate, screaming at the groom for one. Groom claims he doesn't have one, but not taking no for an answer, she rifles through his pockets and finds one. Holding it aloft, she screams at him that he's a liar and slaps him clean across the face. The groom, obviously not having enjoyed this, returns the favor and punches her. The best man spots this and leaps across the sofa and tackles the groom to the floor. They're now having a full-on fistfight while the bride sobs incoherently. I try to get out of the way as I'm being trampled by Mr. WKD and his scummy friend. My supervisor storms in saying he found snow in the bathroom and the police are on their way. The best man is off like a robber's dog and the groom stands there, stunned, and then follows his new wife into the function room. We then hear screaming and shouting from that room and the bride has picked up a chair and launched it at her husband and was now holding a second one trying to charge him with it. At this point, it's about 2 a.m. and I am royally done with the day. My mom is watching for me outside, so I grab my bag and head off, giving my supervisor strict instructions to tell me exactly how this ends when I'm back for my next shift. I pass a riot van of police officers on the way out the door, directing them to the drama, and I go home. Next shift, I'm informed that an ambulance arrived shortly after the police. The groom was taken to the hospital after sustaining a head injury, but he did a runner from the paramedics when he got to the hospital. The bride stayed at the hotel and, to console herself, spent the night with a male wedding guest she danced with. They left together in the morning and a week later announced on Facebook she was in a new relationship with him. A few quick clarifications. First, for those unfamiliar, a nature wee means to take a leak outside and is sometimes known as a wild wee. Do with that information what you will. And second, no, it wasn't an Irish wedding, but I have a lot of Irish family, so I can't understand why that assumption may have been made. Story 2. I'm not sure if it actually counts, but when my mother married my now stepfather, it was originally supposed to be an outdoor wedding near the edge of a lake. But the day the weather turned so bad, they switched it last minute to a church about 100 feet away from the original spot. A big deal, and I'm pretty sure this place was built exclusively for weddings, because it did have a church and reception hall along with like 20 small buildings each with 2 to 3 rooms, except one that was one room. Anyways, both of my mother's parents are gone, so I'm the one that gets to give her away. I'm around 11 to 12 at this time. I also had to give away my stepfather for reasons I'll add after this. I gave them away, the ceremony is coming to an end, and the minister asks if anyone has any objections. It's quiet for a couple of seconds, and boom, a huge crack of thunder. It's over a decade later, and we still joke about it. A few extra things that happened. My now stepbrother refused to go because he hated my mom. 3 weeks before the wedding, my stepdad's parents said my mom had been sleeping with his brother. We hadn't seen them in years. 2 weeks before the wedding, my stepdad's parents left a message on the answering machine about how my mother was a terrible daughter for getting married 3 months after her mother passed away. My grandma had been telling them they should get married for 4 to 5 years already at that point, and this was the final straw where everyone was uninvited. All in all, though, it was a relatively fun wedding. I did all the fun stuff that the father in the wedding usually does because I was the only one really for it. My uncle was my stepdad's best man, and my other uncle couldn't make it. As for a more fun wedding, though, when my uncle got married, I was 20, and he got married at a relative's house that had a very large property, and they set up a beautiful outdoor wedding there. They also set up a great alcohol tent, and the closest people, including me, to the newlyweds spent the entire night drinking and partying. We ate breakfast before we went to bed. It was amazing. I don't remember anything after the ceremony, though. Story 3. Musician here, play frequently at weddings, and this was by far my worst one ever. Not at the moment of speak now, but still pretty impressive. So the groom books my string quartet for the entire day, ceremony, drinks, meal. All seems to go well, though you can tell the groom's family is much more well off than the bride's is, and she seems to be a bit of an attention seeker. But either way, the ceremony and drinks went without a hitch, and everyone seemed very happy. Fast forward to the meal, we played through the whole thing, and as we were packing up, they started speeches. Usually we'd have left by this point, but our stuff was in a little side room off the banquet room, separated only by salon-style swing doors, and we had no way of getting out unless we walked awkwardly between the guests' tables, so we decided to stay put until the speeches were over and listen in. Best man's and FOB speeches went well, and then it was left to the groom. He thanked everyone for coming and then said that for his speech, he needed everyone to open the envelopes that had been placed on the tables. Now, we'd noticed these on the way in, but hadn't thought anything of it. There was an excited bustling as people appointed someone on each table to open the envelopes, followed shortly by a very quick change in the atmosphere. Someone gasped, and another person audibly said, "What the hell is this?" amongst the general confusion. The groom gets back on the microphone and says, "Yes, I'm sorry to say that what you see in these pictures has been going on for about 2 months. Needless to say, I will be annulling the marriage. Thank you all for coming." Turns out the bride had been having an affair with the best man, and the groom had found out and hired a private investigator to photograph them at it. He'd printed the pictures and put them in the envelopes. Of course, chaos ensued. The groom dropped the mic and bailed immediately. The bride's mother threw red wine all over her dress and kept screaming that she was a harlot, along with an awful lot of things alluding to the fact that she'd never find another good rich man again. The groom's 2 brothers roughed up the best man pretty badly. There was a lot of screaming and glass throwing. The bride was crying uncontrollably, and everyone left as it was so awkward. We just hid in our little side room until everyone had gone and then emerged, slightly shell-shocked, to inspect the pictures. There could be no doubt as to what was happening in them. The groom emailed us a few days later and apologized to us as he realized we'd got stuck. He explained that he'd only found out a fortnight before the wedding, and having paid for everything with little chance of refunds, he just decided to go ahead with it and out her so that she couldn't twist the story to her family after the fact. How he made it through the entire wedding, I will never know, but it certainly made for an interesting day at work. Story 4. 2 disasters. My Jewish friend married a Gentile woman. His immediate family were secular and didn't object. But his grandmother started bawling loudly at the start of the wedding ceremony, yelling in Yiddish for somebody to stop them, and making a huge scene when the family tried to remove her. She said some other stuff in Yiddish as well, but nobody was willing to translate whatever it was for us non speakers. My nephew, who'd had a severe head injury and wasn't quite right, got engaged to a very combative woman nobody liked, try though as they did. It began at the rehearsal dinner. The father of the bride, she being the youngest of his 8 daughters, unsteadily walked over to my nephew's dad and stated, "Tell your son he's making a big mistake. She's the worst of the lot." The wedding itself actually went okay, but as the couple walked out of the church and went to get into the limo, my nephew decided to invite the best man in his date to ride with them. The bride wasn't having this and loudly declared so. Turned into a huge fight in the limo. Driver had to stop and drag my nephew out and put him in a separate car. Against all odds, the reception went off without carnage, but proceedings didn't end well. They went to an island honeymoon resort, and after 2 days, the owner kicked them out because of their unceasing screaming fights. The end took several more years. One night, my phone rang after midnight. It was my nephew calling from a phone booth. He tells me, rather calmly, that she's trying to end him. At that moment, there was a huge crashing noise. She had run the car into the phone booth. Fortunately, there were steel and concrete posts protecting the booth from just such a situation, and he escaped relatively unscathed, and she was too heavy to pursue him any distance on foot. The divorce took 2 more years. She's the worst of the lot. Should have asked if he could swap them out, and I want to go to this guy's family's Thanksgiving. I would seriously pay some money for a ticket to that show. Anyway, since you're already here with me on this channel, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my upcoming videos. Here's story 5. When I was 13, we went to my second cousin's wedding. Everything is going great. They even got past the "speak now or forever hold your peace" part. They wrote their own vows, but before my second cousin's fiancée wife could even begin her vows, his son got up and announced to the entire room that she was cheating on his dad with her dealer, and he couldn't let his dad marry her. My second cousin yelled at his son to either sit down or leave. The son left. My second cousin married her anyways, and 5 years and 1 baby later, he found out it was true, and they separated, but they were too tweaked out to be able to afford a divorce. Finally, he got married a third time, but before he could get married, his third, now ex-wife, had to pay for their divorce. This wedding had no objections. They moved to Missouri, and this time, instead of separating or asking for a divorce, he decided he didn't want to be married anymore and just moved back to California to get back together with his second ex-wife. Story 6. I was working at a wedding when I was younger. I was running the bar at the reception, which was very close to the hall the weddings were at. We were told that the reception would begin around 4 p.m. It was already about 3-ish, and I was packing fridges, the usual barman things, while one of the male guests was still sitting there drinking. I asked if he was not joining the reception, to which he replied something along the lines of, "When I have the courage." He downs his drink and leaves. 10 minutes later, he's back, looking extremely disappointed. Guy orders a drink, and less than 30 seconds later, another guy who's dressed extremely well, turned out to be the groom, walks in, punches him in the back of the head, and leaves. This dude just picked up his drink and sipped it further. I eventually found out that this dude had downed his drink, walked into the reception, and admitted to being with the wife on her hen night, and again the night before the wedding. He was never invited to the wedding. He just felt the groom needed to know. So he found out where the wedding was, suited up, and dropped the info mid-ceremony. Story 7. About 5 years ago, a co-worker of mine invited all of us to his wedding. He was a great guy, but none of us has ever met his wife. We've seen pictures of her, and he always said nothing but good things about her. Fast forward to the wedding. It was an incredibly nice one. Looks like they paid quite a bit for it too. Everything was going smooth, and I was having fun and assumed so was everyone else. Anyway, now they're both at the altar or whatever, looking deeply into each other's eyes and smiling, and when that line comes of "speak now or forever hold your peace," I get anxious, but nothing ever happens. So right as soon as the anxiousness fades away, the bride's mother stood up and objected, blurted out some crap about how she doesn't want to continue their family with a man like him. He was black, she was white. The bride-to-be cried and ran off. Wedding went frickin' silent. Bride's dad took the mom and ran after the bride. The groom stood there, incredibly awkward. He may or may not have achieved actually leaving his body. Anyway, the groomsmen took him away. I left because it was too weird. Apparently, the reception went on. They did not get married that day, but ended up together anyway, privately, and surprisingly, work wasn't weird. He laughed about it, and they are happily married. The mother in law never truly stated it was because he was black, but this guy was incredibly nice, selfless, and just someone who you completely felt comfortable around. Never judged anyone either, and well spoken. The mother in law also never showed signs of hating him, so who knows why it happened. Maybe the bride and groom found out, I'm not sure. I have since moved and haven't spoken to them since then, but man, does that memory last. Story 8. So I'm attending this ultra chill beach wedding in a small town in Canada. I don't know most people because it was my ex step aunt, so my brother's family I never see. Anyway, it was fun. The bride flew in on a seaplane and all the chairs were set up on the sand. Anyways, the groom is from Trinidad and Tobago, so all his relatives traveled a long way and had cool accents. There was a party before, and we were all a little bit tipsy. So as the ceremony progresses, everyone is watching, getting teary-eyed from the vows. Then the line comes, "Any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony? Speak now." Nobody expected this. The father of the groom gets up, flailing, and a collective gasp followed by silence overtakes this tiny venue. We're all waiting with bated breath, but he's just standing there with glassy eyes. Turns out he was baked. This 70-plus man in a suit and dread laughs and says, "No, I kid. And the whole spirit of the audience cheers up as he sits back down. Rest of the reception, people are going to him saying, "Good one," or scolding him. "Damn good night, best wedding I've been to." Yeah, I'll have what he's having. Story 9. I once went to a wedding where both families were Irish. Girlfriend knew them, but I didn't. At the ceremony, the groom's ex-wife started shouting crap and was gently directed outside. I couldn't hear what was said. The reception was amazing. Nice venue and all, but a bunch of guests had brought their own instruments and just started jamming what I can only describe as a genuine Irish jig. This went on for hours and remains a lasting memory of oral beauty, but I digress. There was a lot of booze, there was no responsible serving of alcohol, and I'm certain it was by design. At some point, I used the men's room and was curious if I had just seen the groom in a stall, door open, with someone who was not the bride. I didn't know these people and it might have just been someone else, so I said nothing. Sometime later, and the girlfriend stated seriously, "We should get going now." "Yeah, sure." We grab our stuff and head downstairs. I see the suspicious fellow again in the stairwell going to absolute town on this same lady. Girlfriend grabs my arm tightly and keeps walking past, mumbles a thank you for the invite. I just smile and follow because it's, well, all weird. And yep, that was the groom with his ex-wife at his own wedding to another woman. The bride genuinely seemed to gem. The look that woman gave us as we passed was this smugly dominant, "I always get what I want, hell yeah," buzzed as heck glare. Wow. They had some reasonable bubbly in a tub for people to take home, and who would know or care if we horked a few extras. I got it all explained to me after we were in a cab and well on our way home. I never got a follow-up to that story, but 10 out of 10 on the music. Would tag along to an Irish wedding again. Story 10. My boyfriend was friends with a guy who was getting a quickie marriage and needed witnesses. We agreed and went inside the little reception room where the preacher, bride, and the groom were lined up waiting on us. The preacher started his thing, and I noticed a woman come in and lean against the back wall. She looked pissed, standing with her arms crossed. Preacher: "Now, is there anyone here today who objects to the union of X and X? Please speak now." The couple looked back at us, and we both smiled. Suddenly, the bride's attention turned to the woman in the back of the room. Bride: "What the hell is she doing here?" The woman quickly raises her hand, looking at the old preacher. Woman: "I object. I don't agree with this marriage." The bride glares at her. Bride: "Shut up. Wait your frickin' turn. It's my scheduled day. You're just mad you didn't think of it first." The woman had to be dragged out of the room, kicking and screaming and spitting at the bride. After the reception, my BF's friend explained that he was originally in a relationship with the bride. After 10 years together, he started being with her sister, the woman. They were close sisters until both ladies got pregnant by him simultaneously. They fought each other like cats and dogs for the next several years until the two cousins became school-aged and best friends. Neither one of the sisters would give up the man, and he wasn't sure which one he loved more, so he kept seeing both women. Last I heard, they were all still together, but the two sisters had teamed up to take down his pregnant mistress. What the? Wow. And if you have the same reactions to some of these stories at the very least, have a heart. Here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I think so too, so I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.